Pakistan cricket at its best. 1 minute down, next minute up.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Generation Gap podcast. That's Daniel Ahmed. Before we start, let's start off with a message from our sponsor. Today's program is Sharma ji ka ladka और Sharma, but this time it's not Rohit Sharma, it's Chetan Sharma of all people.
Yeah.
Chetan Sharma, of course, we have a very deep association with Chetan Sharma as Pakistani fan. क्योंकि अगर वो ना होते तो किसको छक्का मारता जाए दाद मुझे दादे को बेचारा इतना अरसा पीटता रहा कि यार मैंने हैट्रिक भी की थी वर्ल्ड कप में, प्लीज को इसको भी याद करे, यार फर्स्ट प्लेस पे हैट्रिक इन द वर्ल्ड कप। और बड़ी साड़ों की हुई थी जब सकलैन मुश्ताक ने 99 वर्ल्ड कप के अंदर हैट्रिक की थी, द सेकंड पर्सन टू डू दैट। तो basically I remember watching that, बेचारे ने यूं फंसा हुआ होता। That's the only thing he had. I can understand why he felt so angry because जब भी उसे कहते हैं यार आपने छक्का खाया था, तो he would always go back to that World Cup वाली hat-trick. I'm the only player to get a hat-trick in the World Cup. He would always say that. और जो 99 में वो जब कर ली ना सकलैन मुश्ताक ने हैट्रिक, उसके बाद वो भी कहने के I think he got it against Zimbabwe or something. तो अब वो भी कहने के बाद नहीं था कि यार अब मैं कैसे जस्टिफाई करूंगा कि जब मुझे कोई कहेगा छक्का खाया। तो बहरहाल this news that came out, I think last जो हमारा वीडियो थे उसमें आपने किया, and I kind of went back and looked into the entire video. So I would say 90% of the content was not that interesting, but 10% of it certainly deserves to be discussed in some detail. So before we getting into that video, I think उससे start करने से पहले I would say the video was obtained by Zee Media. So the way they obtained it, and it is clearly in their video कि जहाँ पे वो चेतन शर्मा को कहते हैं सर हमने कैमरा बंद कर दिया, हमने माइक बंद कर दिया, आपने जो बात करनी बात कर लें। He was clearly uncomfortable talking to them before that. So वो हमें पता है कि उन्होंने झूठ बोला था उसके साथ और उसको entrap किया गया था. That is obviously that should not have been done. And वो बात है कि उस वजह से जो Zee Media है that in itself doesn't come out looking all that great. But having said that, we're here to discuss the content of what he said. But of course एक caveat शुरू में देना चाहूँगा किस तरीके से वो चीज़ है वो पेन की थी, and that उसकी जो एक legality है या lack of ethics उसके अंदर है, we definitely should acknowledge that before we proceed. So उसमें जो कुछ चीजें हैं जो let's just start off with the things that were mentioned that I feel like are not that controversial and not out of the world. For example, the fact that Chetan Sharma mentioned कि जी हमारे बहुत सारे players हैं, they don't want to admit that they're injured, and वो बात अपनी इंजरी है तो अपनी बातें हैं हमें बताते नहीं हैं because obviously they feel like कि जी अगर हमने बता दिया हम injured हैं, go out of the team, में टीम में दोबारा जगह नहीं मिलेगी. These are very normal things, we know about that, especially in competitive sports and in sports as competitive as cricket in India. बहुत मुश्किल होगा किसी भी प्लेयर के लिए अगर वो टीम से बाहर जाएगा तो उसके लिए वापस आना it becomes almost impossible. That was a very normal thing for him to say. गांगुली और कोहली का जो relationship है, I think that's an open secret as well. Everyone knows they do not get along. वो भी कोई इतनी बड़ी बात नहीं थी. I think the only thing that he mentioned, which was a bit more of interest, was कि कोहली ने without telling Ganguly ये press conference कर दी थी और कह दिया था मुझे टीम से निकाल दिया गया when he was not removed by Ganguly as per Sharma. But I think you had a point on that, right?
Yeah, so I think that was a lie because so we have to approach this video very carefully. So we have to judge sort of what can be true and what is not true, because at the end of the day, Chetan Sharma did know that he was he was talking to someone in the media, and he knows that even if he's saying something off the record, it will get leaked in the media. Sources in the BCCI say XYZ, right? So he did cater his sort of like statements in a certain way to give that sort of impression, and which उसमें बात ये थी कि Kohli wanted to leave ODI captaincy on his own and he shouldn't have like क्या कहते हैं announce कि मुझे निकाला गया है because उसको निकाला नहीं गया था, like it was a mutual decision, something like that basically. Again, I don't think that's true because I think it's just factually there. There's no like two point of views about it. Virat Kohli left the T20 captaincy, and he was pretty adamant about it. Yeah, I'll still be the ODI and the Test captain. He got removed from the ODI captaincy, and when he got removed, Ganguly का statement आया था कि now I don't know if Ganguly, I don't remember if Ganguly specifically said कि मैंने निकाला है, but he basically said कि there cannot be two white ball captains. So he was clearly, the idea was कि अगर आप T20 की कैप्टनसी नहीं करेंगे तो हम आपको ODI की भी नहीं करने देंगे. So there was a level of force involved, and that's why Virat Kohli came out and he said कि मुझे निकाला गया और मुझसे पूछा भी नहीं गया ये सब कुछ. ठीक है. So again, that is something that I would not trust, because again, we are judging external evidence from this, so we're not taking everything at face value. At the end of the day, he's still talking to someone in the media. He still has some interests that are aligned with BCCI, which sort of contaminates what he says at times. So, yeah.
सही सही हाँ. And I think हमारी discussion भी यही हुई थी कि of course how do we judge these things overall, the statements that he's made, and we feel like वही बात है कि even though a lot of those statements were taken secretively, we should not take all of that what he said at face value. It is something to be looked at, and perhaps something जिसको investigate करना चाहिए further, especially on the subject that we come to later on. But यही बात है कि जो उसने specifically चीज mention की थी with regards to Kohli and Ganguly, I think even that is not a huge thing. मतलब ठीक है जो थोड़ा बहुत था कि हाँ उसने mention कर दिया पहले जाके और उसे नहीं करना चाहिए था, or certain facts do not align, but even that wasn't like a huge thing. उसके अलावा अगर बात कर ली जाए, I think there was a mention of certain players who he said kept in touch with him. I think like हार्दिक पांड्या की वो बात कर रहा था कि हार्दिक पांड्या keeps in touch with him और उससे वो बातचीत करता रहता है. To some extent you can say maybe मतलब एक वो favoritism वाली बात या उस तरह की चीज आ जाती है. I think कुछ हद तक आप उसे कह सकते हैं, but still not a huge thing. The bigger issue is what I think what you were mentioning was कि उसने mention किया था there are certain players who have a certain degree of social clout or
Yeah.
clout or something, जिसकी वजह से उनको टीम से निकालना जो है वो बहुत मुश्किल हो गया, right?
Yeah. So again, we were mentioning this in the previous video as well. I mean, it's more about the fact that this was rather obvious. So like, I'm not saying he means KL Rahul or like Chiteshwar Pujara, but पिछली video में we were talking about how players like KL Rahul and Chiteshwar Pujara उनकी selection समझ नहीं आ रही because there are इनकी इंडिया की bench strength बहुत अच्छी है. They could easily get replaced by much better talent. And वो बात हमें समझ नहीं आ रही थी. And that's where I brought up the ZTV वाली बात. And वही बात है कि like it makes sense in that sense कि I mean ये पाकिस्तान में भी होता है काफी हद तक कि there is a higher authority or higher pressure that prevents certain people from being dropped. At the end of the day वही बात है जो मार्क्स की बात है कि players have an exchange value and a use value. When they're not useful, they still have an exchange value, and that is important to to BCCI. तो I think वो power काफी हद तक आ जाती है.
Exactly. I think वो एक चीज थोड़ी सी maybe की जा सकती है, somewhat controversial I guess. That can also be mentioned in that regard. But वो बात है कि there wasn't too much in it until you get to the part which was about doping, quote unquote doping कह लें. क्योंकि he doesn't exactly mention that word. So basically coming to one of our commentators as well, जिन्होंने बात की थी, some guy who commented, उसने कहा था उसने doping की बात नहीं की थी. Actually he said everything but the word, and we can very easily infer from that कि उसने क्या
Yeah.
बात. So just in the interest of clarity, मैं वो जो specific words उसने बोले थे वो मैं कर देता हूँ. उसने क्या कहा था कि some players just take injections on their own and they say they are fine. उसने कहा not painkillers, they take injections and it is almost impossible to detect. Now why would you take something that is impossible to detect? Again, आगे चलते हैं, they'll need prescriptions for painkillers and they'll get caught by anti-doping agencies. Again, anti-doping agency किस चीज को पकड़ती हैं? वो भी चीज आप
Yeah.
देख लें. They take injections because they know but injections will not be caught by the agency. We can't say that yes they do this, but we can't say that they don't do this as well. ठीक है? तो अब उसमें आई अंडरस्टैंड उसने ये नहीं कहा एट एनी पॉइंट कि जी प्लेयर्स डोपिंग करते हैं, बट लुक एट इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ थिंग्स के वो कह रहा है वो चीजें जो कि डिटेक्ट नहीं की जाती बाय द एंटी डोपिंग एजेंसी, राइट?
Yeah.
उसने ये प्लस ही आल्सो सेड द वर्ड नॉट पेन किलर्स. सो अगेन क्या चीज है जो उसके अलावा आई मीन आप खुद समझ जाएं कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर ये अकलमंद को इशारा काफी है, तो यहाँ तो काफी इशारे मौजूद है अकलमंदों के लिए. तो
Yeah.
उस तरह से मैं ये कहना चाहूंगा कि मतलब दिस इज क्वाइट क्लियर व्हाट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट. ऑल्सो द फैक्ट कि अगर हम बात करें कि दे डू दिस टू पास फिटनेस टेस्ट, व्हाट्स द मेन फिटनेस टेस्ट दैट द इंडियन टीम goes through? So far as we know, maybe there's something that we're missing, but the one that we know is the, what do you call it? I think the ping pong test. What do you call that?
Yo-yo test.
Sorry, yo-yo test. Ping pong is not saying again. Terrible line, but yes, not
Yeah.
the ping, the yo-yo test. So the yo-yo test is based entirely on checking your stamina, right?
Yeah.
And स्टेरॉइड्स और इस तरह की जितनी भी परफॉर्मेंस इनहांसिंग ड्रग्स होती हैं, दे हेल्प टू इनहांस योर स्टैमिना एंड इट वुड बी मच इजियर फॉर यू टू पास दैट टेस्ट. सो इन कॉन्टेक्स्ट हम बड़े आसानी से अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं व्हाट ही इज टॉकिंग अबाउट इज परफॉर्मेंस इनहांसिंग ड्रग्स दैट कैन हेल्प यू पास दैट टेस्ट. उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हम बड़ी आसानी से वो लगा के बता सकते हैं. दिस इज अ बिगर इशू फॉर अस कि उस तरह की चीज की जा सकती है. ऑफ कोर्स कमिंग टू दैट we would like to have a few caveats in that. उसके बाद ये कि अगर for example, I feel personally speaking, I think maybe anti-doping agency का stance different है कि even injuries को heal करने के लिए you cannot take anything that might be a steroid or a performance enhancing drug or anything like that, even though most civilians can do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like उस चीज में I think it should be allowed. Ethically speaking, I feel like a player is a human being first. और उसकी अगर इंजरी है या पेन में है तो ही शुड बी अलाउड टू टेक दोस थिंग्स इन ऑर्डर टू हील हिमसेल्फ. वेयर आई ड्रॉ द लाइन इज परफॉर्मेंस एनहांसमेंट. और यहाँ पे जिस तरह से बात की जा रही है, दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट टेकिंग समथिंग टू हेल्प पास अ टेस्ट व्हिच रिक्वायर्स व्हिच इज समथिंग दैट टेस्ट योर स्टैमिना, राइट? तो उसमें ऑब्वियसली परफॉर्मेंस एनहांसमेंट की जा रही है. इट्स नॉट जस्ट कि वो उसने कहा कि वो लेते हैं ताकि दे कैन हील क्विकर, कि वो कुछ एक चीज है जिसमें आपकी हीलिंग टाइम इज लाइक 3 months और आप मे बी 1 month के अंदर रिकवर करके आ जाते हैं. इट इज नॉट मेंशन दैट. ही मेंशंस कि टेस्ट जो होता है फिटनेस टेस्ट पास करने के लिए करना पड़ता है, राइट? तो उसके लिए तो यू नीड समथिंग दैट एनहांसेस योर परफॉर्मेंस. ही स्पेसिफिकली मेंशन समथिंग लाइक दैट. अगेन उसमें मैं ये मतलब एंड द सेकंड कैवियाट आउटसाइड ऑफ इंजरी हीलिंग इज के the kind of pressure the players are under. I think उस चीज को भी एक्नॉलेज करने की जरूरत है, जिसके इसमें भी चेतन शर्मा ने भी जिक्र किया था कि प्लेयर्स नो कि अगर हमने जगह छोड़ी तो हमें दोबारा टीम में जगह नहीं मिलने वाली. वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू गेट बैक. सो imagine that kind of a pressure as well on you, and that environment and that pressure is kind of pushing players to do those kind of things as well. That is also not fair for them. आई थिंक वो भी एक बात है कि हमें थोड़ा इसको भी एक्नॉलेज करना चाहिए कि वो भी उनके साथ ज्यादती है. कैसे एनवायरनमेंट बनाया जाए जहां पे प्लेयर्स को फोर्स किया जाए कि दे आर फोर्स टू हाइड देयर इंजरीज, दे आर फोर्स टू टेक दीज काइंड ऑफ ड्रग्स टू डू दैट. आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट दे गेट पेड अ लॉट ऑफ मनी, बट एट द सेम टाइम फ्रॉम अ ह्यूमन पर्सपेक्टिव आई थिंक वो चीज भी हमें जरा समझनी चाहिए, देखनी चाहिए. बट बात वही है कि डिस्पाइट दैट आई थिंक वी शुड acknowledge the fact that the statements imply that there are players and big players जिनका जैसे हमने कहा था they were superstars who are using performance enhancing drugs to pass their fitness tests. So
so I think वो जो superstar की बात है उससे एक interesting बात ये आ जाती है कि if he's saying superstar under the assumption, he's talking about certain stars that you would expect to be fit, completely fit. And there are people जो कि you would expect के like under the context that he's talking about, if he's specifically saying superstars in that context, what he really means is people you would not expect to be doping. And that raises a lot of question marks, which we'll discuss later. But I think I wanted to point out Shikhar Dhawan ka case as a prime example of what happened. Because Shikhar Dhawan was, so like जो dominant team थी ODI की India की from 2013 to 2019, उसमें Shikhar Dhawan had a huge role. So he was like the third best player after.
Very underrated, but he was definitely one of the best performing players during that time.
Yeah, so he was like the third best player at the time, fourth best player if you count MS Dhoni. So basically, he was dropped immediately after. I think not immediately after, but like after 2019, despite being the fact कि जो इंडिया की बी टीम है वो उसको कैप्टन भी कर रहा है, वो न्यूजीलैंड जैसी टीम्स को भी हरा रहा है ओडीआई में. But somehow he's the captain of the B team, but he cannot make it into the A team. And
Hmm.
वही बात है कि that goes to show how ultra competitive it is to make it into the team. So yeah,
I think he specifically mentioned Shikhar Dhawan as well by name.
yeah,
शिखर धवन, आई थिंक ईशान किशन में भी, संजू सैमसन की बात कर रहा था, किसकी बात कर रहा था कि इनकी टीम में जगह जो है वो बस बड़ी प्रिकेरियस किस्म की है.
yeah. So basically यही बात है कि like these players are संजू सैमसन का तो बहुत बड़ा एक वो मुहिम है ना कि उसको डालें टीम में. And he is someone that has an amazing average. He's a wicket keeper as well. But for some reason, despite the relatively mediocre performances of KL Rahul, even Rishabh Pant in limited overs, उसकी टीम में for some reason जगह नहीं बन रही. And again उसमें either दो बातें आ जाती हैं जो we've already discussed. We'll discuss it further. But I think एक बात तो यही है कि social clout है. Someone like Rishabh Pant is a star already. You cannot remove him. And then there's also the fact that if players are doping and they're passing fitness tests, it's hard to deny their selection. So yeah,
हाँ बिल्कुल. अब वो भी अगर फॉर एग्जांपल अब जगह नहीं छोड़ेंगे, वो प्लेयर
yeah,
जिसको a lot of times and this is like across all sports, players get opportunities when other established stars get injured. उनको चांस मिलता है, वो जाते हैं, they perform and then eventually the judgment is over from that player. It happens all the time. तो उस वजह से वही बात है कि इफ दे आर डोपिंग एंड दे आर नॉट लीविंग द प्लेस, दूसरे बंदे की जगह भी नहीं बनेगी. लेकिन यहाँ पे
yeah,
सिचुएशन ऐसी भी परफॉर्म भी नहीं कर रहे, सिर्फ फिटनेस टेस्ट की बात भी नहीं है. पीपल आर गोइंग इन एंड नॉट परफॉर्मिंग फॉर इयर्स ऑन एंड. वो तो लास्ट वीडियो में हम कह रहे थे कि 2 साल से गुजारा परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा. He's been averaging 30 for the last 3 years. For 3 years actually. He's been averaging 30 for the last 3 years at least. Less than 30, 29 something average कर रहा था.
yeah,
केएल राहुल भी पिछले 2 साल से आई थिंक परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा. तो वो तो एक जेन्युइन आपका एक इशू है. यू हैव दिस प्रॉब्लम जहाँ पे बहुत सारे प्लेयर्स सब पावर परफॉर्मेंसेस दे रहे हैं एंड दे स्टिल इन द टीम, दे हैवंट बीन रिप्लेस्ड इवन दो देयर आर रिप्लेसमेंट्स मौजूद
yeah,
हैं. अब इस हद तक फेवरेटिज्म का रोल है. इट सीम्स लाइक इट देयर इज समथिंग देयर. Obviously when he mentions it again, take it in a salt. जो हमने बात की थी किस हद तक उसको हमें सीरियसली लेना चाहिए, वो भी मुझे देखना पड़ेगा. लेकिन at the same time there are these facts outside of this conversation as well, right?
yeah,
हमें नजर आ रहा है कि प्लेयर्स ऐसे हैं जो बड़े से टीम में हैं मौजूद, they haven't been performing well, there are replacements available and they're still not being removed. अभी तक उनको रखा हुआ है अपनी टीम में. अब आगे शायद केएल राहुल को कुछ निकाला गया after like 2 years or
he
something.
was dropped as vice captain for now. So I think he'll get a few chances before he's gonna get dropped. Um, but what I wanted to point out was the fact that the reason why we know this is like very valid or accurate is the fact that Chetan Sharma got fired because of it. So we know that when he was towing the company line and when he was talking badly about Virat Kohli and siding with BCCI, obviously one doesn't lose a job because of that, right? Because you're basically like you don't get fired for like siding with the company, right?
हाँ
Um,
बिल्कुल.
but what I think specifically was the scandalous part where he went against the company line was the doping part that we talked about.
बिल्कुल.
That was something Joe that really hurt BCCI, and that's why he had to resign.
देखो वो बल्कि इंटरेस्टिंगली उसको पहले उसने रखा, फिर उसको निकाला, फिर उसको दोबारा वापस रखा, फिर उसको निकाल दिए. Like he was under
Yeah,
2021, right?
yeah,
उसके बाद फिर दोबारा 2023 में ही रखा था और फिर उसे दोबारा निकाल दिया.
yeah, exactly.
Bragging about being a politician, uh, he certainly did not. He certainly wasn't very careful with his words. Let's be honest. क्योंकि वो एक इंटरव्यू के दौरान कहता है कि मैं तो पॉलिटिशियन रहा हूँ, मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है पॉलिटिक्स का, तो मैं तो अपने सारे बोर्ड के लोगों को जो है वो आई कीप देम यूनाइटेड कि एक ही आपने यूनाइटेड फ्रंट पेश करना है. पांचों सेलेक्टर्स जो है उनको उन्होंने एक ही बात करनी है जब वो आगे जाएंगे और बात करेंगे. ओ भाई मतलब आई डोंट नो व्हाई, मतलब आई थिंक दिस इज समथिंग लॉट ऑफ पीपल हैव. हम सबके साथ थोड़ा बहुत मसला होता है कि अगर कोई बंदा हमारी बात सुनने को तैयार हो जाए, वी टेंड टू से टू मच. you know.
Yeah, yeah,
तो
exactly.
वहां पे वो बात है कि he could have just completely ignored that guy or just given him some platitudes here and there. कोई ऐसा मसला ना बनता लेकिन hmm?
I do want to point out from a Pakistani perspective, absolutely not surprising if someone at a high level position leaked information to a random person. Because यहाँ तो हर रोज होता है कि हर बंदा आगे बोलता है असल में आईएसआई ये चाह रही है, असल में आर्मी ये
हाँ
कह रही है। मुझे एक बहुत ऊंची सोर्स से पता चला है ये, तो लोग तो बताते रहते हैं।
Basically, what we're saying is कि यहाँ पे uh, this entire issue that sort of erupted, I think mainly it was because of the doping scandal. I feel like again, this is something to be looked into. हमने ये कहा था कि even though शर्मा ये बात कर भी रहा है, चेतन शर्मा, this is
Yeah,
still something जिसको मजीद एक्सप्लोर करना चाहिए. Our problem is कि हमें लगता नहीं कि ऐसा होगा. I don't think they look into it very deeply. चेतन शर्मा
the
को
news
बस
got buried.
द न्यूज इज ऑलरेडी बेरिड. बहुत कम लोग बात करें
Yeah,
जो कर भी रहे हैं ऑनलाइन. आई थिंक थोड़ा बहुत जो इनिशियली जब आया था तो उस पर कुछ ट्रैक्शन हुआ था, बट आफ्टर दैट इट काइंड ऑफ गॉट बेरिड. और जो लोग बात भी कह रहे हैं द डोपिंग थिंग इज लाइक वेरी बाय द वे. लाइक क्या
yeah,
मतलब? दैट्स ह्यूज न्यूज.
yeah,
हाउ यू नॉट अबाउट दैट? चेतन शर्मा मतलब लिटरली द बिगर पार्ट ऑफ द डिस्कशन इज कि अच्छा गांगुली जो है वो कोहली को पसंद नहीं करता. वेल, नो शिट, वो उसको पसंद नहीं करता. वी नो. ये कौन सी नई खबर है?
वो आप गंगुली से जाके पूछ लो, वो बता देगा।
बता दो, वो खुद आप कह देगा कि मुझे नहीं पसंद वो. लेकिन बात ये है कि जो असल चीज हुई थी डोपिंग वाली, उसको तो हमें जिक्र ही कोई नहीं किया.
हाँ,
दैट्स द मेन न्यूज, राइट?
yeah, exactly.
तो मतलब ये तो ऐसे है कि 9/11 जो है वो हो और आए वो एयरलाइन डिलेज की बात करें, यू डोंट टॉक अबाउट द एक्चुअल प्लेन हिटिंग द बिल्डिंग. तो
Yeah,
बात है कि दिस इज काइंड ऑफ दैट सिचुएशन कि मेन खबर है उसका जिक्र आपने नहीं किया. उसको भी थोड़ा आपने साइड पे डाला कि जहाँ ये बात भी उसने की थी. शुक्र करें ये भी कह रहे हैं लोग. आई
yeah,
थिंक दैट थिंग दैट नीड्स टू बी एक्सप्लोर्ड कि आप देखें कौन से बंदे हैं जो कि डोपिंग कर रहे हैं, कोई उनके टेस्ट वगैरह करवाएं, प्लेयर्स को चेक करें, सी इफ
yeah,
एनीवन इज डोपिंग एंड काइंड ऑफ ब्रिंग देम आउट. बट आई एम प्रीटी श्योर, मैं ऑलमोस्ट 100% गारंटी के साथ कहता हूँ कोई बंदा नहीं पकड़ा जाएगा. कुछ भी नहीं होने वाला. एंड लिटरली एवरीथिंग विल बी बेरीड वेरी वेरी सून. अभी हम भी जो उस पर बात कर रहे हैं, द ओनली रीजन वी वांटेड टू टॉक अबाउट इज बिकॉज हमें लगता है कि ये चीज बिल्कुल बेरी हो जाएगी. वी डोंट रियली हैव दैट मेनी व्यूज और यू नो that big of a
yeah,
following anyway, but I feel like for posterity at least हमें इस पे बात कर लेनी चाहिए कि यार ये चीज भी बात सामने. और उसके बाद उसको दबा दबू गया. No one really talked about it. No one wanted to talk about it. Because obviously कोई बात है, it's a Pandora's box. इसको आप
yeah.
खोलेंगे तो बहुत निकलने वाला है.
No,
तो
but
या
like वही बात है कि इसमें like, can you hear me?
sure I can hear you.
Yeah, इसमें capital plays a huge role, right? So like capitalism and like just businesses in general. Because वो एक इतना बड़ा, अब like nowhere else other than India इतना बड़ा business network बन चुका है that is thoroughly ingrained within Indian cricket. So like if you just go over and look at Virat Kohli or any of these players ki Instagram and like if you open up Indian TV, they have formed such a huge network of advertising. Okay, a lot of these brands depend on क्या कहते हैं BCCI for their profit margins. And उसकी वजह से काफी हद तक जो है ना, if these specific, like this is kind of ridiculous कि अगर if 11 players get into such a scandal, that has a huge impact on, I wouldn't say huge impact on the economy, but it has enough impact to roll heads. Roll heads in this basically कि
हाँ,
like
there's a lot of money involved. अब देखें कितना ऐसा हुआ था. जो क्या नाम है, टाइगर वुड्स का अपेरेंटली जब उसका निकला था सारा केस विद हिज इनफिडेलिटी. आई डोंट नो इफ यू हैव
yeah,
फॉलोड दैट और नॉट. लेकिन द जर्नलिस्ट न्यू फॉर एजेस, लाइक 10-10 साल से उनको पता था. अपेरेंटली वंस द न्यूज केम आउट वी फाउंड आउट, सब लोगों को पता था. अपेरेंटली नो वन टॉक्ड अबाउट इट बिकॉज इट वाज टाइगर वुड्स. और सबको पता था कि यार टाइगर वुड्स के बारे में बात निकली तो पूरा गेम ऑफ गोल्फ जो है वो अफेक्ट
गिर
होगा उससे.
जाएगा. Yeah,
ऑब्वियसली. तो उस वजह से कोई बोलता नहीं था. एवरीवन न्यू अबाउट इट, नो वन टॉक्ड अबाउट इट. सेम सिचुएशन रोनाल्डो का केस में भी है. यू नो अबाउट रोनाल्डो के जो रेप के चार्जेस आए थे,
yeah.
क्रिस्टियानो रोनाल्डो. तो
The
अगेन दोज गॉट बेरीड.
the level of mental gymnastics that Ronaldo fans play, like
और जो है वहाँ पे लोग इवन मे बी बाबर आजम पे भी ये आए थे. in the interest of fairness, let's say कि बाबर आजम पे charges आ चुके हैं. I don't know कि वो भी probably bury किए गए हैं. I'm guessing because for the sake of interest, because we understand कि उसका कितनी power है PCB के अंदर. So I think before we go, we can discuss as well, which you were mentioning about this idea of fitness as well in Indian sports. And I think that I think was kind of fascinating as well. What exactly do you want to say about that?
So basically, the idea is that I think ever since Kohli ki fitness हुई है, and because Kohli became such a huge star because of his fitness and in general he became a huge star, he sort of became a benchmark of what a good body looks like, or what a good fit body for cricket looks like. Now we must understand that this is not how bodies work, and like anyone that is into fitness, anyone that has anything to do with physiotherapy will tell you straight away that all bodies do not behave the same. Unki fitness standards are very different, and what worked for Kohli does not necessarily mean it will work for everyone. Sometimes low body fat, extremely low body fats for people can be harmful for their stamina, for just in general. So for someone like Kohli, what had helped him was he got faster, he gained more stamina. It worked for him. He knows if he eats too much, he'll get fat. वो एक अलग बात है. बट हुआ ये कि चूंकि उसके ऊपर इतनी ज्यादा मीडिया कवरेज मिल गई, वो थोड़ी सी कमर्शलाइज हो गई, वो थोड़ी सी सेंसेशनलाइज हो गई उसकी बॉडी. So other players in the Indian cricket team clearly started following in his footsteps, right? And that has a lot to do with how Virat Kohli himself, by the way, enforced such fitness standards. वो भी उसमें accountability आ जाती है कि उसकी भी fault है काफी उसमें, कि एक certain way है कि where the Indian cricket team की body should look like. And what this story, if it is true, clearly says is that people who we see as with people with six abs, very thin, very muscular, they're clearly still not fit. And and that what it really does is it should force people to sort of re-examine their definitions of fitness, what it means, because ultimately it really should mean that you should be able to run around in a cricket pitch without tiring. अब वो स्टेट किस तरह अचीव होती है, वो आई डोंट थिंक उसका कोई एक linear या monolithic answer है, as we tend to believe, and that's what we can clearly see Indian team में क्या हुआ है इसकी वजह से. Yeah.
उसके I would जिससे हम बात कर रहे थे कि look at the performance of Azam Khan today, who scored like 7 or 42 or 43 balls, and he's been consistently one of the best hitters in the Pakistan team. Even look at the situation in the 2003 World Cup with Inzamam ul Haq going there, and I remember Inzamam actually he lost like 10 kgs or something for that World. But that was his worst World Cup and one of the worst runs in the team, where he actually got thrown out of the team after that. इतनी बुरी उसकी performance throughout. Although part of that was I think in a match where he actually looked really good in the against India, he was actually performing really well and he got run out. Unfortunately, in that match, he looked in superb form, but he unfortunately got run out. But overall, कहने का मकसद ये है कि the extra fitness did not really help him. In an edge in any way. The fatter version of so-called Inzamam ul Haq was actually a much better batsman. He came back into the team जब बांग्लादेश के खिलाफ उसने वो सेंचुरी मारी थी and he won that test match for us. But वही बात है कि उसमें yes there is कुछ commonalities जरूर होती हैं fitness के हिसाब से, and this is a larger question in that regard कि actually fitness क्या है. And I do agree with the fact कि there is a lot of individual things that we ignore. हमें लगता है कि एक जब हम वो कहते हैं ना कि एक लाठी से हमको हाँकना शुरू कर देते हैं, that becomes a problem. हमें लगता है एक ये body type जो है it works for Virat, so it should work for everyone. No, that's not true. Just because it works for Virat doesn't mean it works for everyone else, and maybe in the pursuit of that it's making them unhealthier. Perhaps. I mean, this is speculation, obviously, but we do know that यार हर बंदे के लिए, and we know from all of us personally, hand on heart, हमें सब पता है कि हम सब की अपनी individual requirements होती है. बहुत सारी चीजें किसी और के लिए काम करेंगी, they don't work for us. हम वो चीज करने की कोशिश करेंगे, they are terrible for our body. दूसरा बंदा करेगा, it's completely fine for them. There's nothing wrong with that. लेकिन वही बात है कि क्रिकेट में भी वही सेम बॉडी टाइप्स आ रही होती हैं, डिफरेंट किस्म के लोग होते हैं, डिफरेंट थिंग्स वर्क फॉर देम. सो वो एक सेशन आपकी हो जाती है विद अ पर्टिकुलर टाइप ऑफ फिटनेस और पर्टिकुलर टाइप ऑफ फिजिक perhaps, that is in the long run detrimental to the team as well. और उस
Yeah.
परसूट के चक्कर में जो है ना वो अपनी सेहत क्या पता वो खराब कर रहे हैं. They might be fine if they had some body fat. Maybe they wouldn't have these injuries. They wouldn't have these like fitness issues or these stamina issues.
Yeah.
But again, this is purely speculation. But I think this is an interesting discussion. So I think we've pretty much covered all that
No,
we
this
could.
is
Is there anything left after that?
yeah, I wanted to point out how the scheduling of India plays a big role in like what happened. Because like way back like so this was a complaint during the Ganguly days basically. Okay, players were complaining that their schedule is too much. And what is interesting about this is by this point there are essentially two Indian cricket teams that tour alternatively in a quest to sort of give their certain players rest. But uske बावजूद I don't think these people have taken significant rest since July last year. Constantly कुछ ना कुछ हुए जा रहा है. They're traveling there. I don't think उनको like जो at least हमारे पाकिस्तान का player I think पाकिस्तान का schedule is also pretty tough. Like we can see with the way Shaheen got injured and like सारे issues जो आ रहे थे injuries के. But regardless, we still have a time between I think from March to June जो free होता. That's 2 months a year, right? And so that's still like a good off period, but I don't see that happening with India. India पूरे साल खेलेगा ये and they have to like play. I can tell that they will play their A team because बहुत सारे इनके matches जो continuously हो रहे हैं वो ODIs हैं. So obviously they're
बिल्कुल.
going to play them. So वो that is an important conversation to have. Um, and it's all and again or I know we're going to title it as Pakistanis react to Indian doping scandal. But ultimately our sort of inquiry into this is much more
Pakistan
empathetic.
empathize with Indian cricket players. तो उसको
Yeah,
जीरो व्यूज मिलने ये हम डाल दें या
yeah,
फिर इस एक व्यूज अगर हमारे आईएसआई की तरफ से आ गया हम पकड़ के ले जाएंगे कैसे ये तो गद्दार है। इनको ले जाओ ये
yeah,
इंडियन का एम्पथाइज करने में लगे हुए
yeah. But ultimately, our inquiry into this is much more empathetic. The idea is again, okay, there's too much cricket going on, and I think any cricket team in the world, any major cricket team in the world, would complain that there's too much cricket. Uh,
हाँ
you could argue economically इस तरह की cricket sustainable नहीं है. Eventually कोई ना कोई burst आएगा and the amount of cricket will have to be forced to reduce because people will just stop watching. That's just what happens. But we don't have to wait until that happens. We can literally value the health of players. And we बात है कि like again when you mentioned this players have an insecurity of losing their position in the team. The reason why they fear losing their position in the team is because they fear ultimately losing a lot of money by losing their place in the team. BCCI is the richest board in the history of cricket. It raises a lot of important questions about the level of salaries that they're giving to their domestic players. Again, they still pay their domestic players way more than any other board. That is understandable. But अगर एक player है जो performance enhancing drugs ले रहा है just to remain in the playing 11 of an international team, that means on some level he's scared to go back to domestic. Why is he scared to go back to domestic? वो उसमें I think कहीं ना कहीं economic factor जरूर आता है. So
हाँ एग्जैक्टली
yeah,
तो आई मीन वो बात तो एक है इवन आई रिमेंबर जेरेड किम्बर वाज मेंशनिंग समथिंग अबाउट प्लेयर्स हु आर रिजाइनिंग अर्लियर राइट नाउ
yeah,
प्लेयर्स को पता है यार हम देयर इज नो वे वी कैन कीप प्लेइंग फ्रेंचाइज क्रिकेट and the grueling schedule of international cricket at the same time. And a lot of players are choosing to resign at a much earlier age. It's already happening, and it will probably continue to happen as well. क्योंकि आपको
yeah,
पता है कि ये होना है लेकिन आई थिंक एक मसला उसमें ये भी आता है कि इंडियन प्लेयर्स टेंड टू प्ले इन इंडिया बाकी दुनिया के तो ये लोग हैं ना वो आगे भी जाके खेल लेते हैं यहाँ
yeah,
पे मसला ये है इफ यू प्लेइंग ईयर राउंड तो यू नीड टू प्ले फॉर द इंडियन टीम
yeah,
you don't really see Indian players in in other leagues, do you? You don't
yeah,
really
yeah,
see them at
yeah,
all,
yeah. That's a problem too.
right? But the
It's not
Indian
allowed.
player ने पूरा करना है, so they have to choose. They can't really choose to play franchise cricket because
Yeah,
IPL तो फिर भी चाहे जितने ज्यादा पैसे हो साल में एक दफा ही होनी है
yeah,
महीने के लिए आपने करना है that. बाकी 11 महीने आप क्या करेंगे डोमेस्टिक खेलेंगे obviously there's not enough money in that you're not really going around playing क्या कह सकते हैं league cricket like a lot of other teams in fact every other team can do pretty much अफगानिस्तान के प्लेयर्स भी कर सकते हैं नेपाल
yeah,
के प्लेयर्स भी कर सकते हैं तो वही बात है कि इंडिया में क्योंकि ये चीज अलाउड नहीं है, सो players if they want to keep playing have to play for the international team, or international team में competition बहुत ज्यादा,
Yeah,
which means there's a lot more pressure for them to stay within that team. There's no margin for error. आप इस टाइम छोड़ के नहीं जा सकते. जरा सा आप हिले जुले इंजर हुए, कोई और बंदा आपकी जगह ले लेगा. 10 लोग खड़े हुए, हाई क्वालिटी
yeah,
प्लेयर्स खड़े हुए. सो द बिग पार्ट इज दैट इशू एज वेल कि प्लेयर्स के पास ऑप्शन भी नहीं है, इंडियन प्लेयर्स के पास स्पेसिफिकली. वो भी this problem has been exacerbating, and I'm not surprised if people are doing something like that. I don't blame them for it necessarily.
yeah. I
But
wanted to make one last point, which is that it really goes to show that economic insecurity kitni deep hai in cricket. So, in the sense that these are the richest players in the world. They have more money than we would even dream of. But because of the fact
हाँ,
that they know that they can only earn until like age of 40, maximum 30, 35. So they have to calculate कि वो सारी जिंदगी क्या करेंगे उसके बाद, like what are they going to do in the next 35 years of their life. So
बिल्कुल.
और उस सेंस में फिर वो इनसिक्योरिटी आती है कि फिर no amount of money feels enough. So वो
हम्म,
that's another issue altogether.
हाँ, exactly, because you know कि you're not just earning for these 10 years, you're earning for the next 50 years.
Yeah,
So obviously that's a very different kind of shit. You might think हमें लग रहा होगा कि यार बंदा एक Instagram post के 5 करोड़ रुपए ले रहा है तो बहुत पैसे ले रहा है, which they
yeah,
actually do charge that much a time. It's an insane amount of money. But वही बात है कि for them it's like कि यार मैं तो बस इतने 10 साल में मैंने कमाना है या 15 साल मैंने मैक्सिमम कमाना है, तो I need to make enough money ताकि मैं sustain कर सकूं for the rest of my life. And
yeah,
obviously they become accustomed to a certain lifestyle, so if they want to maintain that as well, obviously. So that puts extra pressure on them as well. So all of that, again, all of that kind of plays into it. The economic side plays into it. The sort of pressure that the players are under, psychological, physical pressure that they have. All of that kind of plays into the fact that players are being forced to do these kind of things. I don't think players really want to be cheap. ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है, लेकिन मुझे भी समझना sort of जरूरी है in this particular situation. Okay, if in fact it is happening, and obviously allegedly अगर ये हो रहा है, तो उस situation में I can kind of understand why players kind of go through this and why they would choose to do something like that, because there are very good incentives for them to do that. But anyway, I think it's been a good discussion, and hopefully we'll see you all soon. Bye everyone.
okay.